All right. Not that it's been forgotten about, but that Rona been messing around, so scheduling for various videos and content and whatnot had to be somewhat changed up among the crew because, well, we're all at different points in our lives as far as 2020 is concerned. I won't bore you guys with the detail and, we're going to get straight into it. All right, this time we're going to be talking about Starlight, aka Etoile, which is the newest class to come out. And no, I'm sorry, it's not in the North American version. However, obviously, at some point in time, you guys are going to get it, and I hope you enjoy it. Please remember, though, as I always state, or has been stated numerous times, the Japanese version and the US version are inherently different. Sometimes it's just a matter of you're going to get what we get eventually, and sometimes it's certain mechanics or weapons, stats are vastly different. I'm not sure when or why this has happened, but it is what it is. So, as always, take everything with a grain of salt. Now, that being said, there's no brief history to Etoile. It's the first time a class like this has existed. It's meant to be a monster of defense. And not to mention, it's one of the only times the class has shown up that's been an advanced class, and there's not truly an explanation or reasoning as to how it came to be. Now, this may be a story spoiler for some of you, so I guess skip around to the 3-minute mark, bare minimum. In the case of Hero, which is birthed by Stratos, and the case of Phantom, which is birthed by an edgelord who loves Organization 13 too much. Etoile is based off of a cast character who's a maid who was friends with these guys in a clique. So she disappeared one day, and then about 10 years later, or maybe 5 years later, when I first looked at it, it still wasn't translated. She just showed back up and now has these abilities and powers. There's obviously a story there or some secret element that's going to be uncovered, or it might be a case of they finished the class and didn't want to wait till they had some type of chronological lore backstory that was extremely deep. I'm not too sure. Remember, even though I play the game in Japanese with English translations, sometimes there are things that just aren't explained canonically yet. So yeah, we can skip into part 2. Okay, for the weapon pros and cons, I'm partially going to blow through this, and when I say blow through, I don't mean I'm going to leave out giant gaps of information, but I'm going to try to shorten the rehashes that'll be similar from previous videos that involve this class, because at this point I've done 2, and both those videos combined are close to 3 hours, so there's really not much new I can give you. But for the people who don't want to watch that video, or who probably just skimmed it, this class utilizes the double saber weapon, it utilizes the wand weapon, and the twin sword, which that name could also be applied to the double saber and vice versa. I don't know how they came to that conclusion. But anyways, we'll start with the twin sabers, which is kind of sort of leaning towards being my favorite. The pros of the twin saber are very, 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 very interesting. Despite what you see on screen, as I've mentioned in this game, and when it comes to some of their science fiction weaponry, there's a lot of elements that don't necessarily you expect to see on something like this. For example, when you activate the strongest photon art for this move, which sends out energy wave slashes, your character is actually stalled in that point in space, or rather stalled in that point in the air. So even though you do this move on the ground, you can literally move left and right while you see your character rotating, because there's some type of anti-gravitic effect happening that defies even in-game logic, much like with the fighter. But hey, I'm not complaining, just showing you how it works. Anyone who's played Kingdom Hearts have seen, well, all the combos in there. The physics on that shit is basically non-existent whenever you start a combo. But I digress. That leads to some very unique situations of being able to evade enemies where normally other classes could not, just because you have more freedom of range or freedom of motion. Not to mention, as I mentioned earlier, you could jump, utilize that move, and the same effects still apply, and you don't see yourself slowly hovering or hovering downwards until after you've completed the move. The weapon action, which I swear this class is some of the best weapon actions in the entire game. The weapon action in particular for the twin saber is quickly becoming one of my favorites. It basically gives you a limit gauge, so to speak, or a super meter, as the more common term is utilized among the gaming world, where you build it up and you can eventually do a devastating move that is to be the strongest move for the class, or at least for the twin saber. Now, there's 2 layers to this, however, so do not forget this. If you fill up half the move, you can do a partial version of the move. And if you fill the full meter, you can, of course, do the full meter. The full meter unleashes a giant sword wave, and it is a beautiful, beautiful form of destruction. Unlike your strongest PA, which does energy waves that get sent out, the sword wave has to strike physically first. In fact, it goes through the ground, and you see light waves of energy come out of it. I'm pretty sure you'll see gameplay of it, and I'll make sure Dylan highlights when this comes out at some point in time on screen so you guys can know when you see it. Now, the secondary weapon action function, which first off, even that alone is a rarity in this game. In fact, I want to say it's the only class that can do this, that has double weapon action functions. The second one is a deflect, and it gives back, I believe, 1/3 or 30% of the damage you receive to the enemy. Now, it does annoy me a little bit that that damage seems to be like it magically teleports over to them. There's no form of energy effect or element on screen that denotes, okay, this aura thingy is going to go directly back to them. You just see a notification. Then again, I do have unlimited FPS on, and I don't have any of the graphics set to low. All the graphic crap is on max, so I could be seeing it, but can't tell because, you know, so much other crap is on screen and whatnot. Also, and this is exclusive to just this weapon, it has a bit of a third weapon action. See, you can send out a long range boomerang type move at the same time that your deflect is activated by simply moving, or rather dashing, and hitting the weapon action as well. And the range on it is actually pretty decent. It goes further than a lot of the other range attacks that involve the twin swords. In fact, I dare say it may go the furthest range wise, and it has a small homing element to it. You'll know it when you see it because it'll look like 2 little sword beams being sent out connected to each other. Other than that, I really do like the fact that, unlike the, or I guess similar to the fighter, most of the photon arts, they are as similar on the ground as they are in the air, but then there's that added range of motion that doesn't really follow any logic that isn't Kingdom Hearts logic. I swear, if I find out that this class was themed after Kingdom Hearts, I'm not even going to be surprised. Might laugh, win a few bets, but won't even be surprised. But one of the most unique features is what I like to call the air cancel, which seems to only be on one specific photon art, which I'll make sure is shown to you guys on screen. What happens is your character arches up almost like a 45-degree angle, and energy blades follow you to do damage, but it pauses once it gets to its apex and then slams down into the ground. However, after you make the 45-degree arch part of the attack or technique, if you will, what happens is you can cancel into pretty much anything else in game. Not to mention your weapon action can be done as well as a photon art in real time simultaneously. Although I don't know who wants to tap the weapon action button the whole time of a photon art unless you're fighting a boss. So I could do half that move, go into normal attacks because I just wanted the elevation to hit an enemy that was high. I could do half that move, go into a completely different photon art. I could double jump or utilize my double jump again. I could activate a dash. And I think I can use a monomate too. Haven't tried yet. So yeah, that's a very unique ability. Now, as far as the cons for this weapon, and even then the con is debatable, the natural attacking speed for this weapon is slower than you would expect, and there's not really a reason given. Even the photon arts, the one I told you about, the energy wave, has an unnecessary spinning twirl pause before you send out the final cross blade wave. And that's just my name for it. You know, the individual energy slashes aren't given names. That may or may not bother some people. Now, another one, and this is again very, very specific, it's the fact that the weapon action in and of itself is something that you can't see its effect being properly utilized. You have to assume based on if you don't feel knocked back. However, this class has things on the skill tree that let you ignore knockback based on if you're sitting still or how much damage you are, or rather are not receiving. So some form of a more clear and concise ability to tell when it's working, other than hearing that one sound that can get drowned out and seeing extra damage go on your enemy, which hey, when you're in a mob of people and enemies and whatnot, boss or not, you can't tell if that stuff is really truly working. That being said, I have a pretty good idea it works because I'm one of those people who naturally moves around or tries to dodge enemies while I'm hitting them. So my flinch reducer or nullifier doesn't get a lot of use. Now, the next weapon I'm going to talk to you about is the wand. And man, it's going to suck trying to find a con. But since we're on pros, let's go into the pros. Okay, so first and foremost, the weapon is more unique and fun than you would expect it to be, especially if you previously utilized it on the Tekker. As with all the advanced classes, even though they use the old weapons, their technique list from normal to photon art is completely different. In the case of the wand, you're basically shooting energy beams out of it. You're not really hitting people with it like it's a hammer, because to me it's a hammer. It totally a fucking hammer. But you also still have that element of being able to move around on screen while you're hitting something with normal and also photon attacks. Most of the photon arts on the wand have the shift function. I'm sorry, all of the photon arts on the wand have the shift function, just like with the Phantom class. And unlike the Phantom class, you don't really so much get a different move as you do a range change on your move. For instance, you have one move that is a piercing energy beam. However, when the shift action is activated, it creates explosion. Excuse me, hiccups. It creates an explosion in front of the weapon. Furthermore, fighting with this thing on the ground and in the air is so relatively easy. One of your photon arts, which is commonly used for travel, can also home, or you can freely move with it if you're using the over the shoulder format viewpoint, where you get the orange reticle on screen. So it goes without saying, fucking, I love this thing. And that's weird coming from me because I'm not gonna lie, I kind of sort of hated the wand / hammer situation. But then again, it was just because I didn't like the idea of this is supposed to be a weapon meant for close range physical attacks, but it only had one photon art, and that one photon art didn't even come out till I believe 2 years after the class did. Don't quote me on the exact time frame. Yes, it still uses magic and it hits things with magic, but hey, it was implied that would be photon arts. I was expecting more than one, but personal gripes don't really matter. Anyways, this weapon is what I like to call a mob buster. Its inherent natural ability to hit multiple enemies at a time makes it essential. In fact, most of this class, if not all of this class, doesn't really seem like it wants to primarily focus on hitting one target. Yes, there is a photon art on every single weapon that is pinpoint accuracy of, okay, if you're directly in front of me, I'm gonna fuck you up and the guy behind you and the guy behind him. Oh, and that guy behind the corner? Yeah, motherfucker, I see you, you next. But in the case of the wand, it's more obvious that it's meant to be the field or screen nuke, so to speak, if people are familiar with that term. Now, also, one of the cool things I like about it, or one of the issues a lot of people have, is that sometimes you can alter your height without wanting to alter your height based on which photon arts you're using. That is a very unique pro and con situation. If I'm trying to hit enemies on the ground, but then I want to transfer that momentum and combo string into somebody that's in the air, or I want to target something that's higher up on the boss because I accidentally hit something lower, simply just changing to that target and using your dash photon art, or even your one that does aerial attacks from the ground, can make sure you get to the elevation you need to get to and still be doing damage continuously. I like it. It is a time saver and it's very unique, even though it moves a little bit slow, and slow is also debatable, I presume. It actually makes it so you never feel like you're not performing well and that you can end a combo string. Combo strings can end when the enemy is dead. That's how I look at it whenever I pull the wand out. It's always hitting something, and few things in this game hit like this. It's a sight to behold. Now, the weapon action for this thing, which, crap, one of my favorite pros. Once you build up the meter that's above your weapon action command palette, pretty sure there's a shorter name for that. Maybe I'll just say weapon palette or weapon action palette. Damn it, it's still long. I digress. When you build that meter up, you have two choices with it. You can press the weapon action button to create a barrier that reduces damage. You could hold it down to create a blast, or explosion. And if you have it fully charged, you're invulnerable during the entire duration of that explosion. So as you can see, you're continuing its title of screen nuke slash anti-mob weaponry all the way up until your weapon actions. There's nothing you can't hit multiple times on this entire weapon. And I do mean that. If memory serves, the most I've hit with the normal attack combo at a time, standing still mind you, was 4 enemies that are directly in front of me and, you know, trying to gang up on me. I believe it was 4 at a time I could hit. There may be people out there who can do more, but also remember, situational. So if I'm having the mob directly in front of me, I'm probably hitting 4. But if I'm in the center of the mob and doing the normal attacks, and just the normal attacks, let alone the photon arts, I could probably do more than that. But, you know, that's for another time. Bottom line, a good wand user with ET can go a long way. They're good on bosses, they're good on mobs, and really ain't nobody doing a lot of solos in this game, or rather enemies never spawn by themselves unless it's a boss. So again, still goes back into what I said earlier. Now, as far as cons for this weapon, I'll say point blank that I do feel like it does attack too slowly. The normal attacks, I've tried out and looked at these normal attacks from 30 FPS all the way up to unlimited, but right before unlimited, the max is about 120. And it's very clear that these normal attacks come out way too slow. That they really do. They genuinely do. Mind you, obviously there are weapons in the game that hit slower or take longer to go through their cycle. That's not my point. We're focusing on this weapon in particular, in this class in particular. It's too slow, especially for late game stuff. In fact, if you actually look at someone who's halfway decent with their wand, one of the first things you'll notice is that they don't just stand there directly in front of the enemy and start off their normal attack. They're going to rotate around them with that unique hover logic defying physics ability that the wand and most of the other weapons have when you're hitting something. Excuse me. So the fact that they need to do that because they know they're going to get popped is insane. Yes, they can utilize the barrier, but the thing is, you want to store up your barrier. The more barrier you have, the quicker you can get to that explosive technique. Now, another con, and this may be player specific, is the whiff potential. Oh God, the whiff potential. As I mentioned earlier, most of the weapon action style moves don't actually give you a different move with Phantom. It shortens or increases the range of the original version of that photon art. So if I want to hit somebody, for example, with my charged up long range explosion, now this one, just to notate differences, is not the one that's involved with your character in the weapon action. It's a regular photon art. I have 2 versions. The weapon action version condenses an aura of damage into a particular target and creates a ball. Whereas the big one creates a barrier or a field, if you will, that hits anything within that mass. That's why I say it's good for mobs. Now here's the thing though. If I do the condensed version, because I want to hit one particular target, or I think it's an enemy that's stationary, someone does a move that knocks that thing out of the barrier, or it teleports, flies, dash, hovers, or just walks out of it, whatever it's going to do, I've pretty much wasted my photon art points. Now, it's not going to bug you the first time you whiff it. It's not going to bug you the second. It's really going to start to bug you when you start having enemies that can ignore any form of damage from it, or who have a high level of mobility. Because basically at this point, the game is telling you, oh, that entire photon art, shift or not, yeah, fuck it, you ain't using it in this case. Sorry, bro. Now, don't get me wrong. Again, that is a very character-specific situation. Also, that's like the only true con I come across. The normal attacks come out a little bit too slow animation-wise. They sped it up like maybe, I don't know, just 5%, hell, maybe 3%. I probably wouldn't even have a gripe about it. And the whiff potential is stupid high. Basically, Sega did a good job with the wand. The fact that I have to really scratch my head and invest another 13 hours into this class I've already put upwards of 80 to 90 hours in. So that lets you know they've done a good job, or at least with, you know, making sure viability is good. And lastly, that their double saber There's a lot more pros than cons, but hey, you can say that about this entire class. And in fact, this weapon, we're going to start off with a pro-con situation. All right, so this thing can actually skip animations during photon arts. That is insane to think about, even someone even acknowledging something like that for an MMO. But here's the thing though. That reduces the overall damage you're going to be able to put out. And that may suck for some. It really might. But for others, well, people like me, you may actually be able or want to kind of sort of balance it. Like some of your move in your combo before you run out of photon points, you want to be the full animation. Whereas others, you just want that quick burst because it's gonna end something, or you know that if you wait for the full animation, your enemy might have a chance to retaliate before you can finish. For example, the strongest move, and I just like explaining it to people. One of the strongest moves for the double saber is a photon art where you do a roundhouse kick on the ground, a giant energy blade spawns right in front of your foot, and then you kick it and it shoots off and hits the enemy and things behind it or nearby it. Now, when you apply the cancel motion to it, it skips the whole first part of that, which is the roundhouse kick to the ground before it launches off the foot blade. It goes straight into the foot blade, which is the part of the move that obviously is going to do the most damage. The fact that I have the ability to choose, I like, because it's almost like I get the shift phantom style weapon action without needing to press the shift button at, that one particular time. Again, though, like I said, that's a pro-con situation. So we're going to step back to that when we get to cons. And my phone just went off. And another pro, surprising absolutely no one, that weapon action though. All right, this time you get a reflect, or rather you get a reflect counter situation going on. Not sure what you would directly call that. Your character does a small rotation from the hip, and anything that hits during that time frame allows you to retaliate with a giant arc slash that is almost guaranteed to make contact with the enemy as long as they don't move too far away from you after it initiates, because your character slightly moves forward, but not by much though. And the damage, to my knowledge, does not represent based on any type of percentage in relation to how your enemy hit you. It just hits them really fucking hard. Keep in mind, it's not a combo, but if it's activated, you take no damage. Keep in mind though, that no taking damage is once you've activated it. So whatever move that hit you at the time of activation, you're not taking damage off of that. So don't assume that you're gonna abuse phantom style iframes, or rather braver style iframes, and just be able to abuse it and go through things without having to worry about anything. Also, it does naturally try to target the enemy. So for instance, and this is weird, I don't know why you would do this, but I just did it for experimentation's sake a long time ago. If you're fighting someone that's in the air, you can just rapidly press the weapon action button and you'll do the slash without it doing its maximum damage potential from being countered or using it as a counter, and you'll slowly start going towards the enemy. It looks weird. Don't do that. Seriously. Furthermore, almost all of its photon arts, much like with the other weapons, hit mobs. Just remember, as I told you, there's a cancel animated version, which only happens when your character is being stationary. So hands off that left analog stick, or WASD, which, fuck, that terrifies me. I cannot play an action game with just a keyboard. I'm sorry. Maybe a fighting game, but that's because of how the buttons are. But other than that, one of the most fun things I enjoy about this class is the wait and see benefits you either way type situation. One of my favorite pros is the fact that you can teleport after you finish the move just by waiting for a special gold reticle, or I guess gold icon, to show up on your character's torso. And it'll teleport you near whatever you're targeting at the time. Oh my god, that is so fun. It's basically letting you know, hey, when you're in the middle of a fight, I want to make sure you can get to your next target after killing something as quickly as possible. I love it. I know it's not all that big in the grand scheme of things, but I thoroughly enjoy that mechanic. All right, and back into the cons. So that pro-con thing, let's flip it on the con side real quick. Your cancel animation or skip photon art partial animation situation lowers the overall damage you're going to do per combo and per use of a photon art. Because remember, you're actually cutting parts of the move off. You're not speeding up how quickly you can activate the move. This isn't Devil May Cry 3. This is, okay, you want to do this move? Tell you what, let me just cut off some bits and pieces for you and take that damage away with it and throw it in the trash. It's just gone. However, some people don't mind that. And I understand it completely. My thing is that it aggravates the crap out of me. I wish I didn't have to choose. I wish there was something on the skill tree where we could pump points into it and it makes sure that the photon art damage becomes the same as if you did the cancel animation as if you didn't. However, that could be viewed as easily broken or OP and blah, 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 a host of other things. Now, another con, and this is just depending on what enemy you're fighting, is the fact that, well, for lack of a better term, your weapon action counter is not guaranteed to always hit. It can whiff just based on what type of enemy you're fighting. But again, that's based on what type of enemy you're fighting. So you're going to know very quickly if you're going to try to activate that counter, you might want to be on some enemy or boss body parts that are very huge targets, slow moving, or is, you know, for lack of a better term, very, very stationary. Now, the final con, again, debatable, but at least for people first starting out with it, it's going to be extremely annoying, and over time you can get used to it, is the fact that the wait and see elements in relation to using the double saber can either benefit or hurt you, and you have to make a decision on the fly practically every single time you decide to do a photon art combo. For example, as I mentioned earlier, if you want to do a photon art combo and get max damage, you make sure you're moving around a little bit, as is the nature of the illogical gravity around the ET, to get the full moves out. However, if you want to get through the photon art list faster, because you know some guaranteed damage is coming, or something you want to easily counter is coming, you know you can just sit there and do the short version, or you can mix and match. You have to make those decisions practically as soon as you finish doing one photon art after the other, after the other, after the other. Most people don't think about it, so that's why they don't have to worry about it as much. Because a lot of people decide going in, they're going to do the full version of the photon art, except for the foot blade one, because they feel like it's easy for the enemy to get away from it at that point, or just because they don't think that it should be as long as it is. And then there's a whole nother mindset that does the exact opposite. They get in close enemy, doing whatever move they want to, and then they do the short version of all the PAs. So if you're in the middle of that, you want to use one side or the other, depending on what situation you're in, that can be a fucking headache. But also, it's something you should be used to at this point, especially if you played the Phantom class, which has a shift action built in, because you know when you do the moves, automatically, okay, do I want to do a shift action or not? In fact, if you stop and think about it, Etoile kind of sort of prepares you for the double saber. I'm sorry, Phantom automatically prepares you for the double saber that's on Etoile. Kind of cool, if not ironic. All right, on to the next part. Class pros and cons. I apologize to the people who automatically are going to get mad in the comments just because this section is short. I see your salt. I do not taste your salt, but I acknowledge its existence. Okay, the fact that you can reduce so much damage on this thing's skill tree just because there are elements that go out of its way to give you built-in defense reduction. I'm talking you can go and fight near in-game enemies with no actual armor on just for craps and giggles. Obviously, don't do that. Defense has a point/purpose. But the fact that it's even an option is insane. Not to mention, as I mentioned earlier, with your stationary, one of the other things you can do, and this is a skill tree ability, not a double saber ability, is nullify or dramatically reduce any and all forms of knockback on your character. So imagine not being able to be interrupted. Yeah, in an action game, being uninterruptible. Devil trigger much? And this is one of the only classes, if not the only class in the game, that has a built-in mobility option already inherently on it. It's in the skill tree, which allows you to basically move around on the stage faster without having to use up photon art points to do moves that send you a long distance. Personally, why isn't that on every damn class? This thing's natural, illogical Kingdom Hearts style gravity movement is second to none, or second only to, if not first off, on the list between fighter, gunner, and ET when it comes to being in the air. And that allows for you to be able to basically stay on the offensive even if you see damage coming in one direction. Because imagine doing a move on any other class where you're stationary, your character will only be in that direction, versus doing any photon art with Etoile, and you can rotate to the side of them, rotate above them possibly a little bit, just because you did one specific photon art, or you were doing a move and didn't let go of the left analog stick and move left or right when you saw damage coming. It's very, very fun and also kind of unique when you play this class. And now for the cons. Well, you can't use magic, but to be fair, I think that seems kind of fair. Oh, and again, in case anyone's wondering, when I say magic, yes, I do in fact mean what the game calls the techniques. Fire element, all of that stuff. Yeah, that goes out the window on this class. And since you can't have a sub, you can't give yourself the ability through a sub. So, sorry, Force family. You didn't win something, but to be fair, you win a lot of other stuff. So, why you mad? Furthermore, as it's mentioned multiple times, the damage reduction and the defensive capabilities on this class are in a league of its own. But one of the trade-off is the reduction in healing ability. See, this class can do most of its healing only with the use of monomate, dimates, trimates, and the atomizer family. But if you go down the skill tree elements that increase your natural defense capabilities and does a damage reduction, it actually nerfs your ability to be healed by any other format other than your regen ability, which is on your skill tree, and like I said, the monomate family and the atomizer family. So if you're in a giant group and the mission is running long, or you just fighting some hard enemies and you burn up 90% of your mates, you're gonna have a bad time, because if the strongest white mage type, I love Final Fantasy or Dungeons and Dragons style gameplay person force uses their most customized version of Resta, you're lucky if you get 10, yes, I said it, 10 HP back. And this is in a game where the HP in in-game is currently well over 1,000, or gets you over 1,000 naturally. You better have some level of telepipe accessible in whatever mission you want, because if you know you haven't mastered your class, or you're not good at deflecting, getting the barrier up and playing defensive, and you get hit a lot, it's going to be a bad time for you. It really is. And I'm sorry for you. Oh yeah, and of course, you know, there's the sometimes pro, sometimes con of the fact that you have the ability to shorten photon arts and make yourself willfully do less damage. Mind you, it's only on one weapon. Some people could consider that a pro in and of itself. Some people could consider that a con, but really it's up to you for that one. All right, let's get into that skill tree segment. Okay, so there's basically two paths you can really go down to when it comes to the skill tree. And again, not going to tell you it's idiot proof, but I will say they're very easy to flowchart. The first path is, fuck you, I want to live. And that's just me shortening it. All right, so there are a lot of attack boosters, either by percentage or flat stat gains on this class skill tree. But also remember, it's a defense god. So you could easily go down the path, as I mentioned earlier, with stuff like Standing Massive and Damage Balancer. Standing Massive being the one where if you stand perfectly still, your knockback is nullified, and Damage Booster being the one of, well, I'm sorry, not Damage Booster, Damage Balancer being the one that dramatically reduces, the more you level it, how easy it is to heal you, but also decreases how much damage you're receiving, because the maximum reduction is about 70%. Holy crap, that is insane. However, there's also the regen element of this, which is Etoile HP Restore, and at max, it can give you about 50% back, but the recovery interval is about 3 seconds, and you're only getting 2.5% across the board, whether it's level 1 or whether it's level 10 on the skill tree. Everything else on the list, besides being applicable for whatever weapon you have on there, is basically meant to be a damage booster in some way, shape, or form, or reduce the amount of photon points. The only difference, or rather exclusion to this, are the recast. Yeah, I want to say recast save and what was the other one I'm thinking about? Etoile boost. No, sorry, not Etoile boost. Overdrive. Now, when you do overdrive, and you usually can only pull them off twice per run or twice per quest, is it heals up your HP and your photon points. And what I like about it is that it actually boosts up your photon points by 50, and you only got to spend 1 point to level it. However, it works for everyone who's on the same field as you as well. So I could be in section A1 and you can be in section 2B, and as long as we're on the same map and on the same floor, everybody in that room or everyone in that general area gonna get that boost up. And that's really, really cool if you stop and think about it. But there's also the, I want to help you guys sacrifice somewhat type of skill tree. Now, there are certain elements on here that give universal or unilateral boosts, not only to you as a character, but to your homies in the nearby field. Recast save comes to mind, which reduces the cooldown of active skills from non-ET party members in the area. So, what's a good one? Let's say you're a gunner and you get your fully maxed out chain time. Showtime and chain trigger going on. Now it ends. Well, guess what? I just shortened how long it takes for it to recover and come off of cooldown. And this is something that only costs you 1 skill tree point. Ain't that something? Also, now this one, I'm not sure if I'm phrasing it right, or I'm not sure how they're going to phrase this in the US. For the Japanese translation, it comes out to a round mate up. And what that does is it increases the HP and photon point recovery effect when a player is in the area, when a player in the area uses recovery items. And it goes up by 110%. See, here's the thing about that. It doesn't say what area. Do you mean on the field, like with overdrive, recast save? Or does it mean if they're nearby you? That's the only thing that bothers me about that. However, other than that, almost everything you can nab on the tree is, same as the fuck you, I want to live situation. So like I said, you can either find the balance between going in on yourself, or I'm gonna make sure I can get my support stuff straight because you don't have to invest a lot, and then going down the list and deciding what I want. I'm in a bit of a unique situation because I chose to make sure I can get almost everything on the skill tree. However, I did not invest a lot of points in a damage balancer. Now, I know a lot of other ETs think, sacrilege! But here's my logic behind it. Because I didn't heavily invest, and when I say heavily invest, I mean max out to level 10 damage balancer, that allowed me to get almost every form of a physical attack strength booster that's on the entire section, middle section of the tree, which is pretty much where all of them are. And I do mean practically all of them. All attack up and all defense up are the only attack boosting elements on your tree that are not in or near the center of the skill tree map. And eventually they're going to make more levels. So who's to say in the future, I may go down the damage balancer tree, never say never. But for the time being, I'm capable of reducing cooldown times, increasing how much people are healing off of mates, and my damage is never at a situation where it's being mitigated unless, I dequipped some form of armor or unit that has giant attack boosters on it. So yeah, to summarize, the skill tree is pretty easy to build up, but hard to master. You might willfully want to go through maybe 1 or 2 skill tree resets to see which version of an ET you want to be. You want to be a defense god, but man, you got to love and build mates and make sure you ration them. Or you want to be a little bit supportive and do massive damage because you can go and nab all of the boosters. Or you want to be, some type of hybrid of the two, It's up to you. You know how it is with these things. We don't tell you how to play the game. You have fun how you want to have fun. Meta is meta, but meta is not fun always. Now, as far as who should play this class, usually I like to put it in the form of advanced, intermediate, or master player, but this one is more of that plus a pacing situation. If you want, or you come from previous classes before you get into a successor that have a naturally slow pace, or you were the type that was on the ranger side of things and you were playing keep away, so you don't have to be insane with how you handle things and how you move around in the field, you may feel right at home at ET, even though it's extremely close range. Let's be honest, because they decided to hybridize all of the advanced, aka successor classes, you know, Ranger kind of sort of got the short end of the stick, but to a lesser degree Force, because your job is to stay away. But you're telling me because I'm an advanced class user, I practically can't do that now unless I forsake at least 2 weapons that are on my skill tree. That are on my weapon palette when I get these advanced classes. For example, if you came from all the gunner backgrounds and you go on the Phantom, you would only be using rifle. Otherwise, any other time you're going to get up close to the enemy, which is not what you prefer to do in these types of situations. Because of its naturally slow pace, which you can accelerate through various means, especially with some things on the skill tree, at least in relation to wand, or just because of your natural play style. It's very conformable to your natural button press rhythm or tempo when you play the game. So in a sense, it is very beginner friendly. However, because of its weapon action functionality and the fact that you have to get extremely conservative and be less whimsical with you receiving damage depending on how you're built up, because you know, if you can't get any heals off of Resta more than 5 versus turning that completely off and being able to be, you know, extremely damaging, but the trade-off is, okay, now you can feel some damage, it can get technical. So this is one I would like to say is easy to learn, fun to master, or hard to master, but not incapable of being mastered. So we'll say that this is a beginner friendly. I will recommend ET to beginners, especially if, you know, once you unlock this class, you don't have a lot of high powered weaponry, because let's be honest, these classes were meant to utilize weapons that people don't commonly associate with each other. So if I have a magic class and I got the wands and I play the forces and I level up 2 magic classes and I go into ET, I'm going to be a fish out of water because I don't have a double saber and a twin saber just laying around like that. So yes, I would recommend ET to beginners, especially because even with the weakest or smallest of weapons, if you get the right skill boosters, skill tree attack boosting elements, your damage, well, it won't rival, you know, someone like Seka or in-game masters, but you'll be able to hold your own and you won't have to worry about dying all the time because someone has to carry you and literally revive you every 5 seconds. So yeah, it's very beginner friendly. And of course, one of my personal favorites, at least for ET, skill ring opinions. We're going to get into that now. Okay, I'm going to just tell you. You've heard it a billion times. I've always recommended a critical boosting skill ring. Here's the thing though. As of, I believe, version 5.0 or maybe 4.998, I don't know. The decimal crap is weird with that. I wonder why games do that. But anyways, they mix down the critical rings. So instead of just having the option of having a strike ring, a ranged one, and then a technique-based crit ring, there's a universal crit ring now. And advanced classes benefit more than anyone else can with these because our weapon catalog touches on every single element, remember? So, get that ring. You get the hell out of that ring. Do what you got to do to make it, because you will see a dramatic boost, not only in frequency of your crit, but remember, the damage output of the crit. Do it, get that ring. Now, another ring I would recommend, and this one is, I believe it's a left ring, so you can consider infusing it into your armor. They recently made this one with that same patch. It's a ring for ET that allows you to do your full weapon action for the twin saber, which is the one I told you about where you create a giant sword wave after pushing it out through the ground. Get it. But it also might be a right wing, sorry. I always say right ring sometimes. So if you do that, you may have to decide sometimes between the two. But let me make it easy for you. Is the twin saber your strongest weapon on your ET palette? Do you obsessively love and play that weapon? If you do not, then I would say keep it in your inventory, not your bank, and put the crit ring on in its place. Obviously, the quick mate ups and the mate lover rings are a no-brainer because remember, depending on how you're spec'd out, your ability to heal or how much you get off heals is dramatically affected by that damage balancer. But also remember, the longer or the more HP you get back from a mate, the slower the game makes the animation to utilize that thing. So you can get smacked out of it. So having something like quick mate or quick mate rings, mate lover ring, hell, even a moon lover ring for when you're reviving your homies, these help you out dramatically because that means you can get back into the fight that much quicker. You do not want to be the only ET in a dungeon or in a EQ who has to go and run to the other side of the map or around some corner just to utilize a trimate fast enough and not have to worry about dying. You don't want to be that guy. I wasn't that guy. I've seen that guy. I didn't want to be that guy. But yeah, that's about it. Obviously, the Valor rings are considered good. You have to craft those. They take longer than normal, but they're not hard to get. But just based on the fact that we now have a universal crit ring, I'm sorry, it just blows the ET Valor ring out of the water for me, so I can't recommend it. Now, all right, with that being said, I'm going to bring this video to a close. And, you know, you guys keep giving us feedback and whatnot. We've probably said it a billion times at this point, but we try to make sure feedback gets looked at. And if you post something and it doesn't show up, ask yourself, did you say something offensive in it? 9 times out of 10, if something offensive was in it, algorithm caught it. Furthermore, I want to go out of this way to give a special shout out to Dylan, who's not only my homie, but also, you know, a fun editor and just good friend to talk to. His birthday just recently passed, and I just want to put in a video. Thank you for your support. Happy birthday, man. Hopefully next year, you and me both can have some much better birthday parties instead of looking like, you know, we're hiding underground like we're in the fucking Terminator movies. Feel free to let us know what you want to see us change and whatnot when we do, you know, updated versions of the class review videos in the future, or what classes you want to see us cover next, or what content in game you want to see us talk about next. I'm not really a streamer, goes without saying, but if I do stream some Phantasy Star Online, that's fine. But since I'm in the Japanese version, I've always debated that because I might be spoiling things for you. So, you know, if you guys want to see us do something like stream season 6 story, season 5 story, or something like that, hey, feel free to let us know or whatever. I'll see you guys when I see you guys.